I've entitled today's sermon, One Day. One Day. The Bible is filled with one-day stories. In fact, most of our lives have a number of one-day stories. If you were to write a personal autobiography, you would have a lot of stories that you would start out with one day, okay? If you look back, a lot of those one days, you woke up and you thought it was like any other day, but it became a one day. Do you know what I mean by that? It's a day that your life changed, maybe significantly, maybe just a little, but life changed because of something you found out, something that happened to you, or a choice you made one day. Now, some of those one days you had no say in. Those are difficult ones. It's the ones where your spouse comes in and says to you, I've had an affair, or I don't love you anymore. It's the day the physician comes into the room and says the test results are back in. And you remember that as the one day. Your boss tells you that they've got to make layoffs, and you're one of the ones being laid off. It's the one day you looked at the list at school and you didn't make the team. It's the one day the girlfriend that you thought you'd marry broke up with you and you had no idea it was coming. Those were the one days that we had no say. But then there are the one days where you made a choice. And you might have thought it was a good choice at the time, or you might have known, I don't need to do this, but what did you do? Now, y'all just sitting there quietly because you don't want to admit it. Because all of you done it, right? Anybody in here not done that? Anybody in there not had one of those one days where you knew not to do it, but you did it anyway, and then it turned into a one-day story? One day, you decided to quit your job. Could have been good or bad that you did. One day, I decided to quit my job, and I went and did this. And then that story becomes really good, or it becomes really bad, right? That's your one day. One day, I nailed the interview, and I got the job. And then it turns out really well, or you rue the day that you got that job. One day, you made a bad business decision that forced you to give a lot of other one-day stories to employees that you had to lay off. One day, you struck someone in anger. One day, you said, I do. One day, you said, I can't take this anymore. One day, you said something you regret. One day, you took your first drink or your first hit that led to an addiction. One day, you got caught looking at porn. One day you touched someone inappropriately. One day you aced the test. One day you made that shot. One day you were the one that cheated on your spouse. When we read the Bible, in large part, it's just a compilation of one-day stories. Human beings just like me, just like you, who had one days that altered generations for years to come. One day that brought nations to prominence, and one day that led to total collapse. One day that made life a lot better or a lot worse. And it is in most of these, here's what I want you to see, in the Bible and in our own lives, most of these one days had one thing in common, is that the decision maker or the person involved in the one-day story didn't know it was going to be the one day when they woke up that morning. Do you follow me? You don't wake up thinking, is this going to be the day? And we'd like to think that we'd see the one day coming, but usually it just doesn't happen that way. You see, one day, and this is why I give you this sermon today, to prepare you for that one day. One day, a situation is going to present itself to you, and today may be that day, where you're going to make a decision, or perhaps, worse yet, you're not going to make a decision. And the decision you make or don't make in that moment will feel like it's just another moment in time. You'll make it not realizing just how significant that one day is. Think about Adam and Eve when she took that fruit. She wasn't thinking how significant that decision would be. She wasn't thinking, how is this going to affect my children and my grandchildren for years to come? She just thought it was another day in the garden. When you have your one-day moments, I want to share this with you right up front, and then I'll kind of unpack what the scriptures say about it. It's not going to be just a happenstance that determines how you make that one-day decision, how that one day is going to go. It's going to be, listen, the character and integrity that you developed or not developed over the course of years that is going to guide you into making that one day life-altering decision that could turn into a day of blessings or a day of curses. You will either react or you will respond. I was at a security training event that a lot of our security team was on. Thank God for the security team. And if any of you don't have a weekly serve one, we got guys that are down here 2 or 3 nights a week doing security. Just watching the hallways when kids are here, worship leaders, somebody making sure the doors are staying secure. That's important now. We don't live in the world we used to, amen? We got to have people like that. We just can't leave our doors unlocked all the time like we used to. And so thank God for them. And while I was at that training, I remember a guy saying something, and he was talking about the training they had in de-escalating a tense situation, or, God forbid, if gunfire started going. This is what they said. In moments of stress, you will revert to the ground level of whatever you've trained yourself to do in a stressful situation. I'll say that again. They said in a stressful situation, you will revert to whatever the base level of your training is to prepare for that stressful situation. You will either react, which means you're not in control, or you will respond. And he had everybody's attention because he'd just been talking about things like it happened with the Nashville school shooting. Like, you can't react, you have to respond. And you're going to react or respond however you've conditioned yourself or not conditioned yourself when your one-day event happens. You're all going to have them. And a lot of days you have them and you make the right decisions, and they don't turn into the one day because you make the right decisions. Everybody tracking with me? This is a big sermon. So Joseph had been conditioned in large part by the one days of generations. What do I mean by that? When it came to integrity, deceit, sexual sin, you look way back to Abraham, okay, his great-grandfather. He pimped his wife out twice. Great man of faith, but he had a couple really bad one days. And then you had Isaac, who did the same thing he saw his dad do. When you're stressed out, when you need help, what do? You let your wife go with another man. Jacob, Abraham's grandson, he slept with 4 different women. Now, one of them he got kind of stuck with, all right? And not excusing it, but I can see how 2, but he didn't need to go with the other 2. Big mistake. And then last week we read about how Reuben slept with his stepmom, Jacob's 4th wife. He should have never had the 4th wife, but Reuben didn't need to be sleeping with her. So this is the family that Jacob was in, and all of these made consecutive poor one-day decisions that was affecting their families in negative ways, and eventually it really came back to bite this one most of all, okay? Now, we remember the story. Reuben did what he did. Simeon and Levi, they went out and killed the people that raped their sister, and then Judah's going to make a mistake. You're going to see that today. He's going to have his one day, but at some point, Joseph realized he had given his life to God. He had a good one day, and he says, we're going to throw away all the idols, but he saw all these sons who had been raised with that bad example, and so he says, you know what, now you think about this. He had a multi-million-dollar business. Now, a lot of times, well, how do you know he had a multi-million-dollar business? Because he had more. We see that Isaac had hundreds of flocks and hundreds of employees, okay? And if you've got hundreds of flocks, not individuals, but hundreds of flocks, multiple camps, multiple businesses that were under him, and you've got around 400 employees. Let me ask you a question like this. How many businesses in Murfreesboro have 400 employees that aren't multi-million-dollar businesses? Do you see that? A lot of times we feel like these guys are impoverished and they're living out there drinking water squeezing water out of a turnip or whatever, trying to survive in the desert. No, he was a multi-millionaire. That's the only way you can have 400 servants. You got to be able to take care of them. You got to be able to feed them. Your business has to provide for those. And so he says, you know what? I can't entrust it to all these older sons of mine. I'm going to start grooming my 17-year-old son, Joseph, good-looking kid, smart. I'm going to groom him to run this multi-million-dollar business someday. Okay? And so Joseph's getting all these accolades from his father, and this is a lot of times what we can do as parents. We dole out the praises a little too soon before their ego can handle it, and it gives them challenges when it comes to self-awareness. Because all of a sudden, they think everybody else loves them as much as their moms or dads do. And man, parents, watch out for that. Just to remind you, not everybody thinks little Johnny is as cute as you think they are, okay? I love it that you put pictures of your kids. Oh, watch my little child here. He just took a step. And everybody hits like, not because they're amazed. They're not saying, you're a great parent. Your child walked. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, oh, you know what? You had a child, okay? Good for you. Look at this baby. Yeah, that's really ugly, just like you are. I mean, that's what people are thinking. All right, but everybody, oh, beautiful, congratulations. They're putting all that on there. It's your first child. I just have news for you. There are 8 billion other people on the planet that have had their first child, okay? So we celebrate with you, but a lot of times you forget that not everybody is enthralled with your child as you are. But when you're pouring in that kid all the time and telling them how great they are, every parent falls susceptible to this, right? When you're telling them how great they are all the time, they start believing it. They lose self-awareness in how they relate to others. Watch what Joseph does here. We never see, I want to tell you something about Joseph. There are only 2 major characters in the Bible, other than Jesus, that we never see just outright choosing to do the wrong thing. Joseph, we never see him outright doing the wrong thing, like choosing, I'm going to do the wrong thing here. He just does stupid things sometimes, okay? And this is one of those that I would classify as a one-day stupid thing. He didn't mean it for it to go wrong, but it really did. It set his destiny in course. It's one day, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. So first of all, why would you tell a dream to a bunch of people who hate you? Especially this dream. He said to them, hey, hear this dream that I have dreamed. First of all, like any of them care. Here it goes. He says, look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. What did he think his brothers would do? They were like, well, it must be the will of God. You're just better than we are. Is that what Joseph thought was going to come for this conversation? This is what I'm saying. It's a self-awareness issue he's struggling with. And his brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. If he would have kept his dreams and his words, they would just hated him a little bit if he would have just kept them to himself. But one day he had a dream, and one day he thought it would be a good idea to tell his brothers that they were going to bow down to him someday. Bad move, Joseph. You're just promoting jealousy. Look how good I am. And when we're constantly celebrating how good we are, when we're constantly putting out there how great our family members are, I'm just telling you something about the human condition. Even if they click like, even if they put a heart on your Instagram, some people will respond with jealousy. Haven't you ever noticed just how many hits does a website get when they report good news about somebody versus bad news? Let me ask it again another way. How many of you have watched a news report or clicked on a report, just be honest, watched a news report or clicked on a news report about Hunter Biden in the last year? You've either watched it or you've clicked on it. Raise your hand if you've done that with Hunter Biden. Okay, the rest of you just must not follow politics at all, okay? How many of you have read recently, how many of you can name 3 things that Joe Biden's son, Beau, did really well? I'm not talking about Hunter, the crazy one. I'm talking about his son, Beau, who did some really awesome things before he died of cancer. How many of you can name 3 things awesome about Beau right now if I called on you? Raise your hand if you could do that. There are 10 great things that I could say about Beau Biden this morning. But you know why we don't know? Because we don't click on things that are good news about people. It's just the natural human condition. Now, some of you are even thinking right now, so are you saying we should vote for Biden? This is what I'm talking about. That's stupid, okay? I'm not saying that I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm just trying to give you some self-awareness. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like these people that people vilify on one news channel and make heroes on another, all they're doing is feeding the monster, which is called jealousy. People love being angry at other people's success. So they hated him even more. So what do? First chance they get, they throw him down a pit and they sell him into slavery. Joseph gone. And I'm not saying it was his fault, but I am saying he didn't help the matter. He didn't make it better. Now, after he's gone, he's got an older brother, Judah. Okay, you've heard of Judah. Name means praise the Lord, okay? He has 3 sons. He married a Canaanite woman, which he should have never done. And he has 3 sons, and they take after their Canaanite mother. None of the 3 of them are any good. First one does something wicked when he marries a girl named Tamar, he dies. Then another son marries her, he does something wicked, God kills him, okay, for what he did wrong. So Judah's got a 3rd son, and at this point, you're thinking your daughter-in-law is either cursed or she's got a really bad STD that has killed your first 2 sons. That's what's going to go through your mind. Like he said that in church. That's what he's going to think. I mean, really, how many of you want to give your 3rd son to the girl that widowed the first 2? You see what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to do that. Like, whew, okay. So Judah says to Tamar, the cursed one, hey, remain a widow in your father's house. Like, go back home to your daddy till Shelah, my son, grows up. When he hits 18, then y'all can get together. All right, I'll take care of you. For he feared that he would die, his youngest would die like his brothers. So Tamar went, and she remained in her father's house. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. Canaanite mom died. And when Judah was comforted, one day, I'll put that in there because this is a one-day story. There was a certain day when this happened. He went up to Timnah to his sheep shears, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite, also a Canaanite. Now, just catch this over. We would just read this, we don't think anything about it. Who are Judah's friends? Who's his best bud at this time? A Canaanite. Someone who doesn't believe like him, someone who worships cult goddesses, someone that sleeps with cultic prostitutes. That's who he's hanging out with. That's his friend, okay? So they're going up to this village together, and when Tamar was told, hey, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garment and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up. Like, this is years later. He's marrying age now, and Judah has just conveniently forgotten to call her back and say, you can marry my 3rd born now. Judah has no intention of putting his youngest son with the widowmaker, okay? So, she hadn't been given to him in marriage yet. So she took off her widow's garment, covered herself with that. We did that, all right? So when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. That's what prostitutes do. You just saw their eyes, and they'd wear something where you could see their build. So he sees her there. Later we see that he thought she was a cultic Canaanite prostitute. Old Judah, he liked the Canaanite ladies. And he turned to her at the roadside, and he said, now, he's probably my age at the time. He's probably early mid-50s when he does this. She's probably 20 to 25. He turned to her at the roadside and he said, come, let me come into you. Well, that's pretty graphic, is it not? Let me come into you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? Wow, what language, okay? And he answered, I will send you a young goat from the flock. And so she's hoping she can get his goat. Did you catch that? She's after more than a goat, I can promise you, okay? And she said, if you give me a pledge until you send it, like I don't have anything with me, what can I give you so we can sleep together? And he said, well, what pledge shall I give you? And she replied, your signet and your cord and your staff that's in your hand. That's the way you would make business deals. This is what really rich guys had, is they had a ring, like with a big old J on it, Judah, that he could put down and make business deals to sign documents and things like that. Like that's the stamp. It's important. It's his business logo card. It's his business card, basically, but it's worth a lot more than that. So he gave them to her, and he went into her. This shows you how dumb men can be, okay? He hadn't been married. He's been comforted. He's gone without a woman for a long time. He does something really stupid here. He gives her permission. He just gave her all his passport information, all the PIN codes for his, like, what's the password to your bank account? Oh, here it is. All right, that's what he's doing. And he went into her, and she conceived by him. This is one day. And then she arose, and she went away. Taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. And 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. Like she's not just sleeping around, she's pregnant. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Man, isn't it amazing how we see other people sin and think they should get nailed? They deserve this. Put them all in jail. Lock her up. And she was being brought out. She sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. In other words, she pulls it out and she said, hey, do you recognize this little thing with the J on it? And then Judah identified them. Can you imagine how his heart dropped? He identified him and said, she's more righteous than I am, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. But she ends up having twins. Now, I'm going to come back to that story in a few weeks. Just remember that story. I doubt you'll forget it, okay? But just remember that. That's going to have importance later on, okay? Now, contrast. It rolls right into, think of a movie, it's going down to now, what's happening in Egypt, where Joseph went, okay? Now, Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, so he's a military guy making big dollars, right? He's the captain of the guard. So that means he's high ranked. The captain of the guard was like a general in the army. So he's going to have a really nice place. He's going to have a lot of money. He lives next to the Pharaoh. And he had bought Joseph from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there, right? And so Joseph, we see at age 17, think about all the dreams that Joseph had. He was going to inherit his father's multi-million-dollar business, and now he's a slave, a stranger in a strange land, speaking a language, having to learn a language he does not know. He's gone from being at the top of the ladder to the very bottom of the ladder. And who knows what happened to him in between as a good-looking 17-year-old man. Only God knows. And so he's stuck there serving this guy, the lowest form of a slave coming in, And this is why I want to remind you, like Joseph could have easily gone into the tank, focusing on that one day his brother, so he could have totally embraced, and almost even righteously so, the victim mentality. Man, I had everything going for me, and now I'm just going to lay down here and die. I'm just going to do the least I've got to do in order to keep myself alive. In fact, I don't even care if I die right now. Like, he had a bunch of one days happen to him, I'm sure, in between when he got sold. Like, he could write a biography of all the stuff that he faced from Israel down to Egypt, I'm sure, right? None of them good days. And he could lay down and say, man, I can't believe they did this to me. I can't believe my father didn't watch over me better. My mom's dead. My dad thinks I'm dead. My brothers hate me. I'm a slave. I've lost $1 million business. Like, he could go on and on with how awful it is, and he's just sitting there at 17-year-old thinking my life is over. That's what you would think. But this is what I remind you this morning. The toughest place to sit is in God's waiting room. And some of you are in it right now. You need a decision to be made. You need something to be resolved. You've been praying and praying and praying for something to happen, for good news to come your way, for success. Like, you've got big dreams. Like, they're not happening. And you're praying and praying and praying. And I just want to remind you, listen, this is just reality. I've been here too. I've sat in this waiting room myself. The toughest place to sit is in God's waiting room. And for some of us, it's easier than others. How many of you are like me? You would rather lose 3 teeth than wait in a line for 15 minutes. Are you like that? You just cannot wait in line. I mean, if I get down here on Wednesday night dinners and I see people in line, I will wait 30 minutes to eat to avoid a 5-minute line. I just don't like waiting in line. Yesterday, we're out the Peach Cobbler Fair. There's a line 45 minutes long. Heck with this, I went in the back door, all right? Like, I want to see what's going on. Is it worth waiting in this 45 line? Like, I can't stand to be in God's waiting room. It's just not my DNA. But let me tell you what, God's waiting room is where he heals us, not in the back room. You're waiting to see the doctor, but God works on you while you're out in the waiting room. That's where he forges your character. And if you'll just be patient and wait and allow things to happen in God's time, in God's way, without making any stupid one-day decisions, he will come through for you. And because of this, the Lord was with Joseph while he was in the waiting room. You remember that next time you go to a doctor's visit and you're worried about what you're going to be told. The Lord is with you in the waiting room. You're in a job you don't like. The Lord is with you in the waiting room. You're in a marriage you don't like. The Lord is with you in the waiting room. The Lord is with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed at his hands. In other words, he didn't sit around and say, I'm going to do the least amount I have to do to be successful. Man, I just want to pass this on. This should be true of all of us in our jobs. Listen, all of us in our jobs, let me remind you this. You should be the best employee at your workplace. The only person who should be outworking you is another person who loves Jesus. That's just true. Like, we trust that if we put our hand to something, that God's going to bless it. But you got to put your hand to it. The Bible says, whatever you put your hand to, do it how? Do you know that verse? With all your might. Give it 100%. Whatever it is you're doing, be the best employee that can be. No matter what role you're in and what company, even if you're at the bottom of the rung, bottom of the ladder on the lowest rung, be successful at that. Be good at whatever you do. Be the best at whatever called you to be the best. Same way your ministry's at the church. You're serve ones. If you're working with Michael in the music department, get on your instrument and practice, practice, practice. Why? Because you're not working as to men. You're working for who? The Lord. Joseph isn't working for Potiphar. Y'all get that? Joseph's working for the Lord. If you're a greeter, be the best greeter you can be. Show up 3 minutes early before you're supposed to be here. 5. Greet some other people. Go to Kim Young and say, how else can I help? What else? That's something I train our boys when we're working out in the yard. If you have a good dad, this is what they'll teach you. When you get done with one task, what do you teach your kids to do when they get done with one task? What else can I do? How else can I help? Do y'all follow me? We don't teach our kids just do your task and then go back to playing Xbox. When they finish one task, they come back and say, what else can I do? They can go play Xbox if mom or dad does what? Y'all are looking at me like, is this a confusing parenting technique? If they come back to you and say, what else can I do? When can they play Xbox? When you say to them, no, that's all I need from you. Go play your Xbox. Go do whatever you want to do. But always train your workers and model it in your own life. What else can I do? Don't you want church staff like that? Church staff that says, hey, what else can I do? What else can we do to minister to the needs of these people? What else can we do to make this a good experience when we come down there? If we want staff like that, don't you want your fellow church members to be like that? Whatever role you have as your serve one, as a member of this church, do it how? With all your might. Press on, not to just get a B. Don't ever say, well, I'm just what? The dreaded V word, a volunteer. Listen, Jesus never refers to his followers as volunteers. I'm going to say that again. Did y'all hear what I just said? That word volunteer ain't nowhere in your New Testament. He refers to us, listen, as doulos. That's the Greek word. And we've taken our Bibles to be politically correct, and we translated it to say servants. But that's not what doulos means. You know what doulos means? Slaves. We are, Paul would say, I am a slave of Jesus Christ, a bondservant. What does that mean? I got no rights of my own. I'm here to ask the Lord, hey, how can I serve? And then when you're done serving, what do you say? How else can I help? That's what Joseph does. Do you get that? That's why he goes from a Hebrew, like he's the worst of the worst. The Egyptians hated the Hebrews. They had no respect of those people. But he worked so hard, and his boss saw, man, everything he works at, he does well. Every task I give him, he does it with excellence. And what that does is it builds trust. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and he attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and he put him in charge of all that he had. Why? Because he knew he could trust him. I remember one time there was a basketball player that played with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant had the ball at the end of the game, and there were 3 guys on him. And his teammate was wide open by the free throw line. And Kobe looked right at him with 3 guys on him with 2 seconds to go, and then Kobe shot the fadeaway jumper. Made the shot, won the game, but the teammate came to him afterwards and said to him, hey, Kobe, great job making the shot there, but I'm a professional too. I was wide open at the 3-point line. I was wide open. And he said, I can't throw you the ball in a situation like that. And the guy was offended. He said, well, why not? He said, he kind of bucked up a little bit. He says, because I don't trust you. And he goes, what do you mean you don't trust me? He says, man, I'm down here working out. I'm leading the league in scoring, and I'm still down here at 5 a.m. getting my shots in. He says, you come rolling in here at 7 a.m. after I've already been at work. You're shooting around 15 minutes before practice, and you thinking I want to put my trophy on the line by giving the ball to you, or am I going to have it to somebody that shoots for 2 hours more than you do every single day? This is who Joseph was. He showed up early. He worked hard. And while he's doing that, while he's having the self-discipline to not be a victim, to not allow the circumstances of the world, to not allow that one day to tear him up for the rest of his life. While he's doing that, he's building trust with Potiphar. And now all of a sudden, he's living in a nicer room. He's eating the nicer food. Everything's entrusted to him. From that time, Potiphar made him overseer in his house and over all that he had. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. This is what I pray for America. Like, we don't deserve anything but God's curses right now. But may the Lord, good Lord in heaven, bless the United States because of the Christians that still remain here. That's my prayer. Like, we don't deserve it, but maybe he'll bless the nation for those of us that still haven't bowed the knee to the Baals. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in the house and in the field. Everything's going well. So Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. Now, then it gives us a little thing at the end of the verse. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. In other words, he looked like Jeff Leach. All right, like he just saw. Y'all tell Jeff Leach when he's in next service. Tell him, Steve was talking about, like, he's all, I just want to be built like Jeff Leach. That's what I say all the time. I just don't want to run miles like Jeff Leach. That's the way it works. Like, I'm trying to get, I've said this before. I've got Dunlop's disease. Have I told y'all that? I got Dunlop's disease. My chest unlocked down to my waist. Like, I'm still fighting that, okay? Trying to get better. Anyway, here's the dangers of success. This is what could have crept up on Joseph at this point. Obviously, I'm good, Joseph could say. Obviously, I got it going on right now. I'm young, I'm good looking, I'm running another $1 million business. Man, you could drop me in the middle of Uruguay and I'd be a multimillionaire. I mean, he's got to be thinking this. It's got to cross his mind. And I want to just tell you this. I'm going to speak to the men in here. I don't know if this applies to women or not, honestly. Like, I could give you advice as a woman, but I'm not one, so I'm going to shut up on that. But I'm going to talk to the men just for a second. I'm just telling you, Steve Willis. The biggest danger of success is when you start thinking you deserve something. I'm just saying, like, it can still be that like that for me at my age. If we've had a good Sunday here, and I see everything hitting on all cylinders, I feel like we've done a good job and seeing what the Lord's done, I can go home on Sunday nights, and I'm telling you, more than any other night of the week, that's the night when I just want to relax and watch a movie, and I'm just flipping through the channels, and I'll just catch myself 5 minutes more than I should have watching some movie that, what am I doing? And I'm just thinking, like, you deserve to just relax. Yeah, I deserve to relax, but I don't need to hear the F-bomb 20 times. I don't need to hear the Lord's name being blasphemed. I don't deserve to just bask in somebody else's sin. I don't deserve that. Sometimes people will say, man, you know what? We don't pay you enough. Well, it's true, you don't. But I don't deserve better. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? You do. You pay me well. I'm thankful. I am. I really am. I'm not missing any meals, that's for sure. But the moment anybody working on church staff, or even where you work, you will cease to be a good employee the day you say, I deserve more. Somebody comes to you and says, how you doing, Ben? You know what the right answer is? Better than I deserve. People are going to say, man, Ben, you deserve this. You deserve that. That's what the devil did when he was tempting Jesus. Man, Jesus, you deserve to eat well. Man, you're the creator of the universe. Turn this stone into bread. Jump off this temple because you deserve their worship. Did Jesus deserve their worship? Absolutely. So the devil tempted him in every way the devil knew to tempt him. But watch this verse. This is a tricky verse. Watch. It says, when the devil had ended every temptation, he threw everything that he had at Jesus. He departed from him, but there's not a period there. It said he departed from him until an opportune time. Now, when's the next time we see the devil coming back after Jesus? He had just come into the holy city. And everybody in town is lining the streets, right? And what are they saying? Save us, Hosanna, Son of David. Everybody's telling him how great he is. Everybody's telling him what a miracle worker he is. Hey, you just raised Lazarus from the dead. You healed the blind man. Like, you are a miracle worker. You are the Son of David. You're awesome. You're the King. You are the Messiah. And all of those things were true. And then the devil comes to him in the Garden of Eden right after God had told him, you're going to have to die for all these fickle people. And if there had been any sinful nature in him, he would have had to think, I don't deserve the cup that's coming to me. I don't deserve to be treated like this by this person. I don't deserve to be in a marriage like this. I don't deserve to be in a job like this. I don't deserve to not have someone who loves me. I deserve a good man. I deserve healthy sexuality. I deserve a better paycheck. When you start running those things through your mind, that'll be the opportune time when the devil can get you. Because you're going to look at a sin, it's going to be your one-day moment, and the devil's going to say to you, you deserve. And there's a reason why it says in this chapter, now, Joseph was a good-looking man. Good-looking face, built really well. Why does it say that? It says the devil comes back at him. It says after a time, Potiphar's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. And she kept saying, like over and over, day after day, lie with me, like not very subtle with those Egyptian women, okay? It says, but he refused. And he said to his master's wife, he refused. He's still in the Lord's waiting room. He says, behold, that's her way of saying, look, pay attention. Because of me, my master's house has no concern about anything in the house. And he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything for me except you. Now, this is Joseph's one-day moment. Watch this. Ooh, here's big. This is like climax of the book of Genesis at this point. I want you to go back. What was the problem Adam and Eve had with the fruit in the garden? The one thing, watch this, the one thing God didn't give them they thought they deserved. Do you see that? Like God had given them the whole world. The whole world was their oyster, but they were focused on the one thing God said they couldn't have. Abraham comes in to Egypt, and he sees all the luxuries of Egypt. He had one wife to take care of, and instead of taking care of the one thing, like he pimps her out. Isaac does the same thing. Jacob, what does he do? Like he thinks, I deserve this. I'm going to cut the corners. I'm going to say, all of these people, going back to Adam and Eve, watch this. Everybody in the book of Genesis to this point focused on the one thing God hadn't given them versus the thousands of things that he had. I'm going to say that again. Everybody in the book of Genesis, Sarah, Hagar, it doesn't matter who you name. To this point, God had blessed all these people and all these stories, but every one of them, when they came to their one-day moment, they focused on the one thing God hadn't given them. Joseph is the first one to say, God's given me everything. How could I not be thankful for the one thing he hasn't given me, which is the ability to live out his sexuality? So many people live this life thinking, man, I can't be happy if I can't live out my sexuality the way I want to. I can't be happy because my identity is wrapped up in my sexuality. I can't find joy in the Lord or anything else in life unless I can live out my sexuality the way I want to instead of the way God tells me I have to. Isn't that our world today? So he's not going to focus on the one thing. He says, you are his wife. And then he shows what really gives him the power over this temptation. It's not self-control he's practicing here. It's not willpower in this situation. Watch this. He says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against Potiphar? Is that what it says? Sin against who? God. And that's what our world has lost about our sexuality. when you don't live out your sexuality God's way, you're not sin. They say, well, who are they harming? If it's two consenting adults, who do they care? I tell you who cares. If you don't do it God's way, then what? You're sinning against God as if that sin matters less than sinning against others. Whenever you hear somebody say the word two consenting adults, what they're saying is, forget about God. Do you hear what I'm saying? I don't care what context you hear it in. When you hear people say two consenting adults, or the day we live in now, 3, 4, or 5 consenting adults. Whenever you hear them say something to the effect, what they're really saying is, forget about God. And what Joseph understands, that all the rest of these didn't. All these rest who said, forget about God, he says, I'm not going to forget about God, even though sometimes it feels like he's forgotten about me. Because I'm still sitting out here, Doc. I'm still sitting in the waiting room. Now, because he stands up with integrity, it's all going to go well for him, right? Isn't that the way it works? When you make the right choice on the right day? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her to lie beside her or to be with her. But one day, here it is. When he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house. Was it a sin for Joseph to go in the house when none of the men were in the house? Was that a sin? Nope. It was stupid, but it wasn't a sin. He knew what was going on over there. He knew how she felt about him. This is why, guys, we need to all follow Billy Graham rule. If at all possible, do not be alone with a member of the opposite sex unless it's your spouse or a family member. Don't do it. This is Joseph's mistake. He's just doing his job, but nobody else was around. Should he have known better? He's probably 22, 23 years old at this point. Should he have known better? The answer to that's what? Yes. It's that self-awareness deal. He's still struggling, which means what? He's going to have to spend some more time in the waiting room. Ooh, we don't like to hear that, do we? I've been sitting in this waiting room a long time, Lord. If he doesn't know better than this, he's not ready to leave the waiting room. I want to say this to everybody in here, man and woman alike. Doesn't matter if it's 2023 BC or 2023 AD. You can do everything right, but if you put yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, you'll end up getting wronged. I'm going to say it again, just make sure it gets through. You can do everything right, just like Joseph, but if you put yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, you'll end up getting wronged. And that's what's going to happen. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and he fled out. She grabbed his coat. Like, he has a hard time keeping coats, this guy, okay? And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household, and she said to them, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me, and he fled, and he got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until her master came home, and she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us, he came in to me and laughed at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me, and he fled out of the house. And as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way that your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. Now, when it says his anger was kindled here, I'm not so sure it's Joseph, and I'll tell you why. Egyptian law, and we have records of this. Egyptian law said even if an Egyptian man rapes another man's wife, he shall be killed. Why didn't Potiphar just kill Joseph? That is if an Egyptian man, another Egyptian citizen did it. If a slave did it, they would be tortured to death. Do you follow what I'm saying? If the master really believed that Joseph did this, Why not enforce the law? Why not put him in the worst of the prisons? That's not what he does. Joseph's master took him and he put him in the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. This is the high-class prison. This is where political people go to jail. Do y'all know what I mean? The cushy places. It's where Martha Stewart went, right? And he was there in prison. Man, if the master really believed that, he's not going to Martha Stewart's prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. I want you to just see how Joseph reacted here. He did the right thing. He's always done the right thing. Maybe he was stupid, but he was still trying to do the right thing. Now he's sitting in prison, so what does he think? I'm just going to give up and be a prisoner here and lay down? No. His character is still being forged by God, and he's saying, well, you know what? The Lord must want me to do prison ministry now. That's his attitude. I'm going to be a prison minister, I guess. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. Don't you think the general in the army probably had a conversation with the warden? Listen, man, I got to get this guy out of my house, but he's special. And the keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Here's the good news I want to give you. I want you to walk out here today thinking this, not just scared to have a bad one-day decision. This is what I want you to remember. God says to Joshua, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. David said to his son Solomon, be strong and courageous and do it. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed, for the Lord God, even my God, is with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. The writer of Hebrews says to all of us followers of Christ, keep your life free from the love of many, and here it is, be content with what you have. Don't tell yourself what you deserve that you don't have. For he has said, this is what leads us to be able to say, I'm happy with what I have. I'm content. I'm ready for the one day. Because he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. No matter what happens to you on that bad one day, this is the verse you got to remember. God's with me. He's got me sitting in his waiting room right now. Why? Paul says it this way, who had had a lot of bad one days, that I may know him in the power of his resurrection and may share in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. When we're in God's waiting room, that's where he's molding us, teaching us to be like him. And John, I'll close with this, says, we are God's children now. And what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that one day, when he appears, we shall be like him because we will see him as he is. Do you get that? How do you get ready for that one day? Well, here's the most important one day I can give you. Is today your one day that you give your life to Christ. See, the one day can be a choice you make or you don't make. And some of you are going to have to leave here today and say, you know what? I'm doing some stupid stuff like Joseph. I got to get out of that. I've been around some of the wrong people at the wrong time. I don't have the friends maybe I should have. Like my focus isn't what it should be. But here's what I share with you. Today can be your one day.